I wanted to start this episode with a belated birthday recognition. Last week marked 7 months since the launch of our freshetnews.ca website, which our amazing team has been filling every day with great stories from Burnaby, New Westminster, and the Tri-Cities. I'm your host, Geof Wheelwright, and with me on the podcast this week to celebrate this milestone are the veteran journalists and founders of Freshet News, Cornelia Naylor, Janice Cleugh, Theresa McManus, and Mario Bartell, with their take on the latest news. Happy 7-month birthday, everybody!
Yep.
Yay!
Yay.
We did it.
Where's the
Also,
cake?
also 500,000 page views.
There you go. There's many things to
Wow.
celebrate. So, in the spirit of celebration, I'm going to start with some good news, bad news stories on government funding. We've had a few stories this week dealing with government funding, a couple of which are about funding being given, and one that talks about what's happening when it goes away. So perhaps I could start with Janice, who has a story about an announcement of new federal government funding that will see $32 million provided to update 2 Coquitlam co-ops.
So to give some context to this story, these are 2 properties that are very close to Coquitlam Centre Mall and the Coquitlam Central SkyTrain stations. They have very good market value and lots of aerial rights of way. These were 2 buildings that were built by the federal government probably 40, 50 years ago. They have good bones, and the landlords fell into some problems. The city of Coquitlam had to put some money into these places, $5.7 million, I believe. Then the provincial government had to step in, and they 2 complexes called Garden Court and the Packard. They were the first to receive provincial funding under BC's new rental protection fund. Now we have the federal government stepping back into these 2 places, and they're now doing green measures for these 290, basically 500 people will be getting double pane windows, heat pumps, energy recovery ventilators, rooftop solar panels, and low flow plumbing fixtures. These 2 buildings are full of seniors that have been there for a long time. They have disabilities. And what this is doing is saving the rental stock. And that was an announcement made this week by MP Zoe Royer.
Fantastic. And we have a second government funding good news story from Cornelia. And this is really more about a city government spending money on maintenance for something that the citizens really value. It's a draft plan by the city of Burnaby to spend $10 million over 15 years to maintain, restore, and rebuild trails on Burnaby Mountain. And Cornelia, I understand this has been much needed for a while.
Yeah. So this plan came about because of an assessment in 2019 that found some issues with the trails. The $10 million is going to be spent over 15 years to maintain, restore, and rebuild 35 kilometers of trails that currently exist on Burnaby Mountain. In a 2019 assessment of the trails, they found some issues, especially with trails on the southeastern side of the mountain: erosion, pooling water, invasive species, both tree roots, which apparently can shorten the lifespan of a tree and be a tripping hazard. And then there were, of course, some stairs, bridges, boardwalks, and signage that needed work as well. Also, an issue on the mountain is what one staff member called many kilometers of rogue trails, so-called rogue trails that are not maintained and present a safety hazard, according to staff. So population growth is only going to put more pressure on these trails. So the city of Burnaby felt it needed a Burnaby Mountain Trail Management Plan. And the draft of that plan has now been approved by City Council. So it's going out for a second round of public engagement. So the city, over the next 2 months, is going to hold information sessions, an open house. There'll be an online survey launched for the public to give more feedback. Letters will also go to the host First Nations. And so as I said, this will be the second round of public input. During the first round, one of the things that city staff heard was that trail users actually are interested in volunteering to support and sustain the park and the trail network. One staff member said that people are, quote unquote, deeply committed to the mountain and its future, which I thought was quite nice.
That is quite nice. You got me curious about these rogue trails. How does a trail get rogue?
I don't want to cast accusations, but I think it's people who want to build trails to do mountain biking. I think is traditionally, and in fact,
Okay.
I just talked to a staff member and said that many of the trails on the mountain that are now city maintained and established were started by mountain bikers who just made trails so that they could ride on them. But there are still some unauthorized, unmaintained trails that people build just to develop certain skills, some jumps, some things that might not be sanctioned by the city that are just more fun and dangerous than the city would probably allow. Maybe. Yeah, I think those are the people who build road trails, I
Okay,
think.
so it wasn't like rogue herds of deer or anything.
No, no. I wish there were that many herds of deer maybe still on the mountain.
And now we're going to turn to the bad news. Mario, you had a story this week about how a Port Moody project for women at risk has been derailed by a provincial funding pause. And it sounds like Port Moody is fighting to get this funding back.
Yeah, as part of a development agreement with BD Living, a company, the developer that's building, wants to build 3 mixed-use towers at Spring Street and Electronic Avenue. The city was able to, in exchange for the increased density, get a 6-story transitional housing project as part of the project. It was something that BD actually came to the table with, and they were apparently assured that there was funding coming from the provincial government to support this type of housing. It's important housing for women and children at risk, low-cost rental, where women and their children fleeing difficult situations could stay for 12 to 18 months as they get their lives in order. As far as I know, Port Moody doesn't have a facility like that, so it was a pretty key thing. But recently, the council learned that the BC government has paused the fund that supports this kind of housing at other projects across the province as well. And now that's kind of put at risk this whole development because, as Mayor Megan Lottie explained to me, that transitional housing facility is a key component of this development agreement. That was part of the reason why council agreed to let BD build towers of 32, 34, and 38 stories, I believe. Increased density. And so I reached out to the Ministry of Housing. They said, well, it's a pause. It doesn't mean the project's canceled. And it's similar to what Cornelia was reporting with happening with Burnaby Hospital. Clearly, the provincial government is feeling the pinch at a lot of levels, and BD says it's still looking for ways to find funding for this project. The company did agree, and when it was making its pitch to council, that the transitional housing building would be part of the first phase of construction. So it was a pretty big priority for the company as well. The mayor and 2 of her councillors issued a press release, I think last week, calling on people to start writing letters to the provincial government asking for this funding to be restored. So right now it's all a little bit up in the air. There's ongoing discussions between the city and BD, and I imagine the province is being rolled in as well to try and get this back on the rails. BC Housing Ministry did say that there are other options available that they're looking at to try and funnel funding towards these kind of projects right now. So it's a difficult situation. It's not the first time that the city has run into a bit of a speed bump with its major redevelopment of downtown. Recently, we talked about the PCI project being slowed down because there's market forces and increasing costs. The developers are all are in a difficult environment right now to build these major projects. So a lot is kind of up in the air, and of course, Port Moody's mayor is feeling pressure from the province to get a certain amount of housing approved for the city. The province was targeted Port Moody as one of its first cities to have to live up to its mandated housing targets. And the mayor says that we're getting it on both sides here. The province wants us to build this housing. We have these few negotiating tools to get other things as well as just the housing, the amenities that the community needs, such as a transitional housing facility. But then the government takes away money that would support some of these amenities. It's kind of like she's saying, well, the province can't have its cake and eat it too in this case. Hopefully something will get worked out because I imagine there is a need for something like this in the community. It's difficult when something like that doesn't happen.
Yeah, and it sounds like that's potentially going to become an election issue.
Yeah, I mean, the development in Port Moody is a big election issue already, and it's been sort of a theme for the last several years. But what can a city do when it's told to build housing, and then it's what tools it has to get things for the community as it allows that housing to get, as it approves that housing to get built, are snapped away.
Thanks for that, Mario. Well, enough about budgets. We'll switch gears now and turn to talking about some inspiring local heroes. Cornelia, you wrote about 4 Burnaby residents who were named local heroes last week for their community work in the city. What made those residents heroic?
Well, volunteering really is what it comes down to. So this is the part of the city's outstanding volunteer awards program, and so every year there's one person who's awarded the Kashiro Cup, and that is the Burnaby Citizen of the Year. That person has to have volunteered for at least 10 years in community programs. But then there's other awards given out called Community Hero Awards. And they're given to recipients who have done at least 5 years of volunteering in the community. They're nominated by other local residents for their time in the community. And so 4 of those were awarded this year. It's the city's been giving them out since 1997, and this year's recipients joined 307 others that have received awards over since that time. So this year's local heroes are longtime Clinton Elementary School Parent Advisory Council volunteer Sarah Kilgore, Danelle Laidlaw, who has volunteered with seniors recreation and arts programs, as well as Burnaby events, including Giro de Burnaby, Burnaby Blooms, Hats Off Day, Classic Car Weekend, and Canada Day. Grant Withers, creator and promoter of the Free Little Art Gallery in the Heights, who also volunteers for Burnaby Arts Council and supports the Stride Fest Burnaby Arts Festival. And Citizen Support Services volunteer Kajuko Yamanada, who also volunteers at the Confederation Senior Center. These people do a lot of work, and the city would be not the same without them. So one thing the mayor said before the awards at a city council meeting was he thanked nominators, because that's one of the ways that the city finds out. The city officials find out about local volunteers. So definitely visit the city's website. And if you know somebody who's a super volunteer who's been doing this and making things work in the city through their own volunteer efforts, make sure to nominate them.
Thank you for that, Cornelia. And we got another story about heroes on the show today, the kind that you'll see out on the streets every week, repairing sidewalks, planting and growing plants, and finding new homes for pets. Those are civic workers. And Theresa, you wrote about how they're being celebrated in New West. And you accompanied the story with a great picture. Do you want to tell us about the story and the picture?
Yeah, photo was one that I took when I was at City Hall, actually applying for the Freshet's business license. I was at the front counter there, and somebody that I know came in and said, "Oh, there's a deer outside." So I ran outside and took photos of a deer, and one of the animal services fellows was in the van, and he was just sort of traveling very cautiously alongside of it as it meandered up 6th Street. And yeah, it was one of the only times that I've actually ever seen a deer in US. It was quite cool. But the reason why I used that photo was because animal services personnel are just a few of the folks that are working in public works in New Westminster. And National Public Works Week is being celebrated in the city from May 17th to 23rd. And at one of the recent council meetings, 2 employees, Melissa Flintoff, she's a community events coordinator, who I actually think was the person who came into City Hall and told me about the deer, and Matthew Pilfold, an arborist. They were there, and they were talking about the different things that city staff are doing this year to celebrate. There's a bunch of outreach events with kids in schools, but it all sort of ends with a open house sort of event at City Hall, and that's on the same day as the Hayak Parade and the Hayak Festival in the park. And so folks can go to the rear parking lot at City Hall, and they can, on Saturday, May 23rd from 11 to 5, and they can learn about some of the things that city employees do, and they can get in a garbage truck and lift the arm, and they can, apparently there's some sort of a horn on one of these vehicles that adults are apparently pushing the kids out of the way to get to. So they said they some of these events, they thought that the kids would really dig it, but apparently adults dig it just as much.
Wow, that is wonderful. Yeah, the city works yard is actually not too far from where I live, so I see those heroes heading out many mornings, like in the winter when, on the odd day that it snows and, the garbage trucks heading out and yeah, they do a lot of
Yeah.
great work, and it's wonderful to see them being recognized.
Well, one of the things that they did say was is that, we see, certain employees that are out there and they're doing, very visible things. For example, I see the people down on the boardwalk down here at the quay and they're, doing the beautiful gardens. But there's a lot of things that people don't really think of, like maintenance of city facilities. It's just either, when someone cleans it, but as the one guy said, is it magic? No, it's just a lot of, work behind the scenes. So
A lot of
I
hard
took photos at one of those city works yard things, and it is true. There are a lot of people. There's a whole sign shop at the city
Yes.
works yard and they do all the signs. You don't think about somebody having to make all the signs that say, "Hey, by order of the city engineer, don't park here." Somebody's got to make that sign, and they have a whole sign shop dedicated to that.
Well, thank you for that. And I am now going to turn from those good news stories to our Freshet 911 segment. Does anybody have any Freshet 911 stories they want to talk about this week?
All was quiet on the Western Front in Burnaby. Since our last recording, we have not gotten any news. So if there are any listeners out there who are seeing things happen on the streets, please send us an email, send us a message.
But you might want to call 911 first, just in
Yeah,
case.
right. Our second call, your second call is going to
The
be
second call.
Freshet news.
Exactly. All right. Well, on that note, I'm going to turn it over to Mario to talk about the New Westminster Salmon Bellies and how they're charting a new course after their Man Cup run.
Yeah, the senior lacrosse season opened last night. New Westminster Salmon Bellies hosted Burnaby at Queen's Park Arena. The Bellies got within one game of winning the Man Cup last year, lost in 7 games to Six Nations in a pretty raucous and well-attended and Man Cup series last year at Queen's Park Arena. And you'd think the next step would be, well, let's get one player here or one player there and win it all this year. But talking to Ray Porcelato, the president of the team and general manager, he said, no, that's not the route they're going to go. He said the Six Nations team, which has won the last 3 Man Cups in a row, is a pretty well-funded organization. They try and build a super team every year. And he said, there's just no way that the Salmon Bellies have the resources to compete with that. So he's going to kind of retrench a little bit, concentrate more on bringing hometown players into the fold and building a team that the local fans can be excited about because they know the names. The kids grew up in the Salmon Bellies minor system and have worked their way up to make it to play on the wooden floor at Queen's Park Arena with the big team. A lot of these guys go on to they do have pro careers in the wintertime. They play in the National Lacrosse League, and there's a couple other leagues happening in the States in field lacrosse that some of these guys go and play in as well. A lot of them have had coming off college scholarships down south, playing field lacrosse there. So it's a high quality lacrosse, so who knows how this will play out for the Salmon Bellies. And the Coquitlam Adanacs also had a good year last year. They got to the WLA final after years of being doormats in the league. And if ever you want to know what the difference one player can make, the Adanacs really turned around last year when they got their goaltender Christian Del Bianco back into the fold. He was initially drafted. He played junior lacrosse in Coquitlam, and he's from the city. But he was drafted by the Adanacs and played part of the first season with them, then got traded to Maple Ridge. And after that, he was pretty heavily invested in his pro career in Calgary, where he had a great deal of success with the Roughnecks there in the National Lacrosse League. And in the summertime, he was busy building a contracting business, so he did not really want to put too much time that it takes to play senior lacrosse. He went and played junior B lacrosse out in Delta. Coquitlam finally got him back onto the team last year after Del Bianco got traded to the Vancouver Warriors. So now he was at home more and could kind of balance his life a little bit better. And it made a difference. The team made it to the WLA final. They hadn't been in the playoffs since 2013. They've made a few additions, but he is still the linchpin of that side. That their coach and general manager Steve McKinley said, This is a guy who elevates everyone around him. He can make a difference all by himself. So it'll be interesting to see how they are able to try and elevate their game this year. They've added a few players. They've got young guys like David Charney, Keen Moon, Robbie Turpin, some local names people might recognize, trying to step it up. As for the Burnaby Lakers, they're struggling. They haven't had a winning record since 2019. They haven't been in the playoffs since 2017. They've made a few additions this season. They added former Maple Ridge Burrards head coach Darren Fridge to their coaching staff to be in charge of the team's defense. And they've made some significant trades. They got Keegan Bell from the Nanaimo Timbermen. And they also added Austin Ducoman from the Salmon Bellies and defender Jacob Power. So it'll be interesting to see how they're able to improve if they can keep up with what's going on in New West and Coquitlam.
Thanks, Mario. And in keeping with the theme of one person can make a difference, there's a couple of stories that you have, Janice, that I thought kind of fit with that theme. The first being about a new exhibition at the Nikkei Museum in Burnaby.
Yeah, there's lots of good work being done at the Burnaby Museum. What is happening is the archivist had just digitized part of the Ueda family collection, which is a series of photos and textual materials that are now part of the Nikkei Museum. This specific collection within the series is called Tomoni, and the Ueda family came from Japan to New Westminster. They lived there from 1920 to 1942, and of course they were forced out of their home during World War II, and they were told to go to Kaslo, and then they went to the New Denver internment camp. One of the children had a disability, and what this collection is a photographic collection of this child and how they developed in an internment camp. And this family was not allowed to return home. Everything was sold. They lived in Queensborough in New Westminster, and they were not allowed to come home. And what the Nikkei Museum has done is laid out a digital collection, which you can see on their website.
That's great, and a very moving story. And you had another story about somebody who's making a difference, and that was a Coquitlam biologist who's exploring the ocean floor for food.
Her name is Sonia Lee. She is a graduate at the Centennial Secondary School, and she is a filmmaker. She is a biologist, and she has done some really cool work with Hannah Sung. You might recognize her from Much Music. They got together during COVID and over K-pop. They love K-pop. And the two of them decided to do a docuseries. It is now on CBC Gem, is now on TELUS Plus. And what they've done is explore the ocean floor and how Korean cuisine is very much seafood based. And she sort of marries the two of conservation as well as food. And the two of them have a really great time. They go to Vancouver, they go to Nanaimo, they go to Calgary. They talk about the connection, their multicultural connection to the ocean. And her name is Sonia Lee, and she is currently in Korea doing a spin-off series.
It's great. I'll definitely watch for that one. Speaking of things to watch for, there's a lot happening this weekend. I mean, I know that I'm going to be at the Hayak Parade, and we've heard about the events surrounding appreciating the civic workers in New West, but what else is going on?
There's also events happening in Port Coquitlam and Coquitlam for Public Works Week, also on Saturday. So if you go to the Public Works Yard in Port Coquitlam, and as well as in Coquitlam, they have lots of things happening. You go see the big machines and turn the dials, whatever you want. And like in New Westminster, you can meet the people that do the great work around the cities. I also want to point out on Sunday is the start of Accessibility Week. Runs from May 24th to the 30th. There's a lot of good things happening in the city, and there's a lot of things that you can try out if you have mobility problems, if you have injuries. There's a lot of classes that you can take and sessions that are happening as well. Also, on Sunday, there is the Hike for Hospice, which is an annual event, so a fundraiser for the Crossroads Hospice Society. And that takes place also in Port Coquitlam, Riverside Secondary at 9:30 in the morning. And that money is, of course, going to the Crossroads Hospice operations.
Great.
I'm going to just jump in here if I can, Jeff, and promote a couple of things that are happening in New West. This is really, as far as New Westies go, this is our weekend. This is where a lot of the historical events happen. And so you've mentioned the Hayak Parade, and that is on Saturday, and it's at 11 o'clock. Over 100 floats, marching bands, community groups, and whatnot, and that'll start up on 6th Street at 8th Avenue, wind its way down, as most folks probably know, till it gets to Queen's Park, and then head that way. Then afterwards, there is a Hayak Festival in the park, and so that's in Tipperary Park, and there'll be vendors and entertainment and all kinds of fun happening there. There is also the open house at the City Hall for the Public's Work. And on Saturday, it's also the 156th May Day. So there will be the crowning of the May Queen. Madeline Whitehead is apparently this year's May Queen, and that's at 1:30 at Queen's Park Stadium.
Yes, that is a lot.
Yeah,
It's a fun and exciting weekend.
a busy one for New West.
Okay, well, now I'm going to turn to our favorite stories of the week. Anybody want to start?
I'll go. I have two favorites this week, and they're both courtesy of Mario. One of them was about another New Westminster tradition. He got some great shots on Victoria Day of the ancient and ancient and honorable anvil batteries firing of the anvils. And so he got some great photos from that event. It was a little bit of a controversy because he used the word quirky to describe it, and some folks took exception to that. But I can assure the community that it was meant in the most loving way, because both Mario and I, as longtime New Westies, really liked that event. Quirky, also by definition, is not a slur in any sense of it's. It means unusual in an interesting or appealing way, according to the dictionary. And if anybody's ever been to that event, it totally fits. And if you haven't been to that event, you should really go, because it's so New West. And my other favorite story is the roundup that he did about the opening of the Western Lacrosse Association season. Anybody who knows me knows I love my salmon bellies. Think you might be able to see a little banner poking out over there, and there might be a newspaper front page there and a book over there. So yes, as I often say at this time of year, it's the most wonderful time of the year, and I thought Mario did a great job in sort of wrapping up what we can look for from New West, Burnaby, and the Coquitlam teams. I will say that I was, even in tonight's podcast, surprised, because when he mentioned that Keegan Ball and Austin Dukeman are playing in Burnaby, I had no idea. So thanks, Mario.
Well, Mario, spotlight is clearly on you. So do you want to go next?
Well, my favorite story is one that readers will have to read next week in our print edition. It's time for the New Westminster annual Heritage Homes Tour, and I was given the opportunity to visit one of the homes that will be on the tour. Sue and Sid Johnson invited me into their mid-century home in Massey Victory Heights, or Victory Massey Heights, and Massey Victory Heights. And, it's a neighborhood that I don't think a lot of people go up to. There's no retail, there's no stores there, there's no services there. It's just completely residential. And just driving up their street, just some really lovely mid-century homes. It's kind of an era I'm intrigued by now. Over the years, I've done many of these heritage home features. And often they're older Victorian style homes or craftsman homes, and then there would be the odd quirky one, like a Spanish house I did once. But this one caught my eye when Heritage New West released their list of homes that would be on this year's tour. This one was actually built from plans that were acquired from Popular Mechanics magazine. And so, and Sid and Sue are only the second owners of this home. They bought it off the original owner and builder. And ironically enough, Sid is a retired architect. So, of course, that irony struck me right off when he told me that here you are, an architect, and you're buying a home. You bought a home. They've lived in it for a number of years, that was built from plans that you could buy for $12.50 from a magazine. And so yeah, it's quite a interesting little look, and they've done many renovations over the years that they've owned it and modernized things, but it still has the original character and a lot of original elements that will be captured in photos that readers will be able to see on Thursday when our next print edition comes out.
I look forward to that. How about you, Cornelia?
Well, I mean, now I'm intrigued by what Janice said, that I could do whatever I want at the public works yard if I go visit it.
If a bulldozer goes missing, we're coming
Turn the
for you.
dials and whatnot.
If a bulldozer goes missing, we'll call you in, Cornelia.
But yeah, no, I liked not necessarily the story that came out of it, but I really liked doing the Burning Me Mountain story because I needed to go up there and get some photos, and I don't often go up there. I haven't really explored those trails very much, but I went up to where the Mintara restaurant is, and I tried to find some trails that looked worn, and it's really quite beautiful. The views from there are just breathtaking.
They
Down
are.
to the Burrard Inlet is like, yeah, it's beautiful, really beautiful. So yeah,
But,
that was my favorite story to do, even if it wasn't necessarily my favorite story.
but you didn't take any rogue trails or make
No,
any.
I didn't make any road trails. You don't know if I took road trails. I might have.
Okay, well, how about you, Janice?
On Wednesday morning, I went to Scott Creek Middle in Coquitlam, and the kids were filled. They were sitting in the gym, and 50 cyclists came walking through, and they were like rock stars. It was incredible. These are riders that are participating in the annual Cops for Cancer campaign. This is for the Canadian Cancer Society. Money raised during this campaign goes to Camp Good Times, which is a camp in Maple Ridge for kids who have cancer, and it's also for pediatric cancer research. This school, over the past at least 20 years, has raised $200,000 for this cause.
Wow.
It is
Oh,
incredible. And the campaign this year, the Canadian Cancer Society hopes to raise $1 million for the Tour de Coast and the Tour de Fraser Valley. What's special about this year for the Freshet News readers is the Burnaby RCMP Sergeant Neil Jones. He is the co-captain of the Tour de Coast, and he had some very moving words to say for the kids. Basically, 1,000 kids per year in Canada get diagnosed with cancer. It is very difficult time for the families, and this campaign raises funds to make sure that they have everything that they need and have the kids go away for a good camp. The end of this 4-month campaign, there is a 800 kilometer trip that the riders do between September 11th and 18th. Like I said, $1 million is going to be pouring into this campaign. And if you want to be a rider, if you want to donate, just go to copsforcancer.ca.
that's amazing. I mean, first of all, the cause, and second of all, the ride. I mean, that's a week-long ride. That's amazing.
Yes, it is amazing, and that's why the kids were so jazzed when they saw the riders come in one by one. The riders also received bead necklaces with their names on it. This is in solidarity of the kids in BC Children's Hospital that receive beaded necklaces from the hospital every time they go through a cancer treatment. And so the kids have hundreds, hundreds and hundreds of beaded necklaces. And so these riders received one as well with their names on it, just to show that they are um, part of the cause and championing the kids.
Wow, that's an
The
amazing connection.
the ride itself is
It
pretty
is.
cool too, Geoff. They get a police escort, and the peloton goes through communities. They get escorted through red lights and traffic intersections, and it's kind of like riding in the Tour de France. I was fortunate enough to go on a couple training rides back in the day, and it's a pretty cool experience.
Well, that sounds great. And I fingers crossed that the weather holds up for them.
And many of them have been doing it for years. I talked to Bob Lee. This was his 12th ride. He's a Port Coquitlam
Wow.
resident. He's now retired from the BC Ambulance. It's not just cops, it's also correction services. And so, these people are committed. And Bob told me, you should never complain. These kids go through so much. And the families are very grateful for what they receive from this campaign.
Shout out to the kids in that school though, because when I read your story and that they had raised $200,000, that is a lot of money for students to raise for that cause, and, like, well done.
They do.
Yeah,
They raise it through bake sales and through small fundraisers.
it's a lot of cookies.
It's a yeah.
Well, thank you for that. My favorite story this week, and I'm going to double up. So Mario's story about the Hayek anvil battery, um, that just inspired me. I mean, something that dates back to the late 1800s, and it's all around a government order that forbidded the use of cannons. And so New Westminster's fire brigade had to employ gunpowder ignited between two blacksmith's anvils. It just, I don't know, I just think that's very cool. And I wasn't there to see it, and I was really, really excited to see those photos. So thank you for that.
It's like Theresa said, it's a very new West event. When I remember I covered my first one in '91. I've covered many since then, and I always look forward to it. It's a small group of dedicated volunteers. I think New West could do a better job of promoting this because the stands were not very full at Queens Park Stadium on Monday. It was a lovely day,
Oh.
perfect weather, and to me, it's just so unique and unusual and quirky that this should be something that's really celebrated on a much larger scale. That I remember back in the day when I first started covering it, there would always be the explosions would be accompanied by a cacophony of car alarms going off around the Queens Park neighborhood. Now, of course, car technology has changed, and no one has the loud alarms going off anymore. They're better. And then the first piece of advice when I went to cover my first one in 1991 was when you're down on the field there and they're ready to blow these things up, make sure your mouth is open so you don't get the pressure blowing out your ears.
Interesting.
So I've always made sure that I do that when I cover it, and the great thing is you get 20. They do it 21 times, so you get many opportunities to try different things and shoot it different ways, and it's a lot of fun.
And you got to have your mouth open the whole time.
Yeah, and one of the fellows I talked to who was involved in some of the faces have changed over the years, but I think one fellow told me he'd been doing it for 59 years. He'd been part of the Anvil Battery.
Well,
Some
for me, number of years back, one of the guys that I graduated from New West Secondary with, when I saw him out there on the field, I was like, "Damn, this means I'm old." But they're just getting younger and younger all the time, I'm sure. But
Yeah,
one last thing about that, Jeff, if I can. I've
yeah.
got some of the names here of the positions in the anvil battery. The powder monkey, the swabber off, the toucher off, the chalker up, the blower up, and the water boy are just some of the positions within the battery. So
and we
that is quirky.
no, we should take those names very seriously.
Well, as a quirky person myself, I have to declare my delight in this story, and thank you again for that, and to use Theresa for filling in some of the many gaps in my knowledge. I really appreciate it. Well, that wraps up another Freshet Friday podcast, but we'll be back soon. In the meantime, keep asking yourself the question, is it Freshet Friday yet? And come on back when the answer is yes. Thanks to our team for being here. Thanks for listening, and have a great weekend.